I'm Kirby Dolak from LCTV, and welcome back to the next episode of Watson Drops, entitled Environmental and Economic Analysis of Littleton. In episode 1, we learned that responsibilities of wastewater management were transferred to LELWD. It was decided to re-examine the common sewer project to possibly solve some additional town-wide issues. This included expanding the previous analysis and needs assessment for common wastewater management and sewer planning. Nick Lawler explained that LELWD was embracing a holistic approach of what sewer planning can mean to economic development while ensuring the future viability of the town's natural resources. With that preamble setting the stage for today's needs assessment episode, we will first focus on a component of Littleton's ecosystem, our water quality and environmental evaluation, with Corey Godfrey, LELWD Water Quality Manager. We will then transition to Maren Toohill, Littleton Town Planner, to discuss the economic areas that will benefit from wastewater and sewer planning. Finally, a discussion with Nick Lawler that ties together the environmental and economic goals for Littleton and a phased sewering plan for the town. We will then transition to Maren Toohill, Littleton Town Planner, to discuss the economic development areas that will benefit from wastewater management and sewer planning. And then finally, a discussion with Nick Lawler that ties together the environmental and economic goals for Littleton in a phased sewering plan for the town. We're back with Corey Godfrey, Water Quality Manager, to discuss water quality and the process that was used to determine water quality areas of concern, or AOC. Corey, please explain what is meant by water quality areas of concern, and then explain what criteria or factors were used to evaluate such areas.
Sure. So as part of the ongoing sewer needs assessment that Nick and Kevin talked about last time, CDM Smith analyzed all of the water quality data that we've collected over the past several years, and they related it to the mapped locations of our drinking water aquifers, and also areas known to have inadequate conditions for septic systems. So that would be areas with poor soils, high groundwater, floodplains, and small lots, as well as information on the locations of actual septic system failures from Board of Health inspections. And by mapping our water quality data along with the other information I just mentioned on known septic system failures, CDM Smith was able to identify 6 primary water quality areas of concern. Those are the Beaver Brook area, the Taylor Street Industrial area, Mill Pond, the Beaver Brook connection along Interstate 495, the Long Lake neighborhood, and Spectacle Pond.
So, Corey, tell us a little bit, an overview of the Littleton's drinking water supply, its sources, its treatment, and its distribution.
Sure. So Littleton gets 100% of its drinking water from groundwater. We have 3 well sites where we withdraw a total of 1 million gallons per day on average, and more than 2 million gallons per day on a peak day. 2 of our 3 well sites currently have treatment plants to remove naturally occurring iron and manganese from the groundwater. And then our Whitcomb Ave well site does not currently have a treatment plant, but we're in the process of designing one with construction expected to start next spring. And then all of the water that we withdraw from our 3 well sites is pumped into our distribution system, which consists of 80 miles of water main and 3 storage tanks that can hold a total of 4 million gallons on any given day.
So since 100% of our drinking water is from groundwater, what is important for residents to understand about groundwater quality issues?
Yeah, it's very important that we protect the quality of our groundwater resources here in Littleton. This is why we conduct so much water quality sampling that I described earlier, and it's why we have an aquifer protection zoning district to prevent incompatible land uses from occurring in the most important parts of our aquifer. If we don't protect the groundwater from becoming contaminated in the first place, then we'll be spending additional money to treat it for human consumption later. So it's almost always more cost effective to prevent a problem from occurring in the first place than it is to solve it after the fact.
So Littleton has 10 or more open water bodies. and brooks that have been classified as either direct sources of public water supply, Class A, or can be sources of public water supply with appropriate treatment, Class B. Some of these Class B water bodies have pollutants. What are these pollutants and their possible sources? How would providing sewering help to eliminate these pollutants?
Yeah, unfortunately, the only Class A surface water body in town is Nagog Pond, and we don't currently have access to that reservoir as a source of water supply for Littleton. The rest of Littleton's water bodies are Class B, meaning their water quality is such that if treated, they could be used for drinking water supply. However, none of those water bodies have sufficient volume to realistically serve as a source of water supply. So this again emphasizes why it's so important that we protect the groundwater resources that we rely on for drinking water. The water bodies in Littleton that do have contamination issues are primarily impacted by bacteria, nitrogen, and phosphorus. And these are all pollutants that are associated with wastewater, as well as stormwater runoff and agricultural contamination. But sewering in these water quality areas of concern would certainly help to address these contamination issues.
So Corey, with all the recent heat waves, we've heard stories of ponds and water bodies becoming contaminated. What are some indicators of pond health? How does LELWD monitor, analyze, and sample these areas for water quality as they do directly impact our groundwater wells?
Yeah, so here at the Water Department, we collect groundwater quality data from over 50 monitoring wells throughout town on an annual basis. We also collaborate with the Clean Lakes Committee to collect surface water quality data from over 15 stream and lake locations throughout town each month from May through September. And then we collect thousands of samples from our 3 public water supply well sites every year. And all of this information gives us a very good understanding of the areas in town that have existing water quality problems, the potential causes of those problems in many cases, and sometimes solutions for solving those problems. And since groundwater and surface water is all connected, it's really important to manage water quality from a holistic perspective and not just focus on one or the other.
Corey, what other sources of pollutants should we be aware of with regards to on-site septic system design constraints? Mass DEP has specific guidelines for Title V treatment and disposal systems. What are the various factors that impact or limit these types of systems?
Yeah, on-site septic systems located in areas with poor soils, high groundwater, or on small lots are more likely to fail and discharge inadequately treated wastewater into the groundwater that we use as a source of drinking water, or nearby streams or lakes that we rely on for recreation. Some of the most important water quality parameters to focus on when it comes to wastewater management are nitrogen, phosphorus, and bacteria. These contaminants are present in all wastewater, and when the existing treatment methods, like on-site septic systems, are not performing correctly, then you can see the impacts to nearby drinking water sources, streams, and lakes. So some of the areas where we see impacts from these contaminants include Beaver Brook, Long Lake, Mill Pond, and Spectacle Pond.
Corey, what happens when on-site septic systems fail? Where have the failures occurred in relation and location to the water quality areas of concern? How will sewering eliminate these failure issues?
Yeah, the Long Lake neighborhood has the highest rate of septic system failures that we're aware of. This is one of the primary areas of water quality concern, along with Beaver Brook, the Taylor Street industrial area, Mill Pond, the Beaver Brook connection along Interstate 495, and Spectacle Pond. So from a purely environmental perspective, these would be the main focus of any sewering initiative in town. However, there are significant costs that come with implementing a town sewer. And the initial goal of a sewer system for Littleton was to spur economic development of the common area, as well as several other areas in town. So we need to make sure that we give equal consideration to the areas that would be expected to see the most economic development as a result of a sewer system.
Now we're going to welcome Maren Toohill, Littleton's town planner, to talk about economic development areas that will benefit from wastewater management and sewer planning. Hello, Maren.
Hello, Kirby.
Maren, please explain how the 2017 master plan fits with our discussions on wastewater management and sewer planning.
Okay, so the Littleton Master Plan, which was adopted April 20th, 2017, includes a robust discussion of economic development. Throughout the master plan process, Littleton residents decided to, 1, concentrate development and preserve open space and agricultural land, 2, bring jobs to Littleton and increase the commercial tax base, 3, support existing businesses and encourage new businesses to open, 4, to provide amenities to residents and visitors, and 5, to allow for different types of housing at a variety of price points. Wastewater management and sewer planning provides a clear path for implementing this required utility service to support the economic development goals outlined in the master plan.
Very good. Maren, the master plan outlines 6 planning areas. What are they, and how will these areas help Littleton reach economic and housing development goals?
The 6 general planning areas shown on the map and cover significant portions of Littleton. The exact extent of each of these planning areas is certainly not set in stone, but is shown on the map to provide context. The Beaverbrook and the Point area is shown in red, Air Road Industrial Park shown in pink, Littleton Common and Great Road area shown in orange, the green-colored Littleton Depot planning area, the purple MBTA Foster Street area, and the blue Taylor Street/Foster Street planning area. Note, for the purposes of the Littleton Station area work, we combined the purple and blue areas. One way to think about the planning process is first you need the master plan to set overarching themes and goals for the town. The second step is for a detailed area plan. We have completed the detailed area plan for 2 areas of town, the Littleton Common with the Littleton Common Revitalization Roadmap, and for the Littleton Station area, the Littleton Station Village Report. Again, noting that we combined the blue and purple areas into one planning area for the Taylor Foster Street area. These detailed area plans further define the details of how each planning area can be developed, including issues such as how to best unlock the economic development potential for each area. The third step is to set the table for the development outlined in the detailed area plan through zoning and infrastructure.
So Maren, help us understand for each of these areas how the infrastructure of sewering allows for the envisioned development to occur.
Having the town address wastewater treatment unlocks the economic development potential for any area within a sewer district by providing this essential utility service. The alternative is the cost-prohibitive method of requiring each property owner to install wastewater treatment for each individual parcel. Recent development in Littleton, or rather lack of new retail, commercial, industrial, mixed-use, and multifamily residential development is based in part on a lack of sewer.
Well, focusing for just a moment on the Littleton Common and the newly adopted form-based code, which I have to compliment the planning board for, what else is necessary to fulfill the town's vision for a revitalized Littleton Common?
As the planning board and our form-based code consultants, we're working on drafting the newly adopted form-based code zoning for Littleton Common. We prepared a graphic showing the work needed to make the Common a vibrant, walkable, and sustainable town center. This graphic shows that adopting form-based code, while an important part of defining what development the town is looking for and what it should look like and feel like, we have more work to do to address transportation, economic development, housing, public spaces, zoning, and green infrastructure, noting that green infrastructure includes sewer and stormwater management. Bringing this question back to the rest of the planning areas, each planning area must be addressed in the context of the environmental constraints of each area, appropriately served with utilities and transportation infrastructure with a strong zoning underpinning, in order to unlock the economic development potential that reflects the wishes of Littleton residents.
I like the phrase unlocking economic development potential. That's good. Now, how did the utilization of natural resources and the economic development relate to each other in the master plan?
To me, both are equally important. The master plan covers numerous topics, including preservation of natural resources, land use, economic development, transportation, housing, historical and cultural resources, open space and recreation, and town government. Each area is key in moving the town toward the vision outlined in the master plan. To quote from the master plan, in 2030, Littleton will be a place that values its history, preserves the characteristics that make it unique, plans for changes to the landscape, and supports the town's sense of community. Littleton will continue to stand on strong financial footing while making investments to improve upon the quality and sustainability of the facilities and services offered in town. The town will support its children, seniors, families, employees, and individuals by encouraging a variety of housing types and employment opportunities and providing quality education, a well-connected and accessible transportation network and services. Community leaders will consider social, financial, and environmental impacts of proposed policies and regulations on future generations to come. Littleton will be a place where residents continue to feel welcome and invited to share the responsibility and fulfillment of helping make decisions to improve the town's future.
We're back with Nick Lawler, the General Manager for Littleton Electric, Light and Water Department. And we're going to be talking about tying the environmental and economic goals for Littleton into a phased sewering plan for the town and where it might make sense to plan for this kind of sewering. So Nick, we've heard from Corey about water quality areas of concern and their importance in providing safe drinking water for Littleton's future. Then we heard from Maren Toohill about unlocking the economic potential of Littleton by providing sewering. How can the town in parallel address water quality areas of concern while at the same time providing the necessary infrastructure to enable that economic development and growth that Maren was referring to?
Great, thanks, Kirby. Well, the water quality areas of concern and economic planning areas overlap or are adjacent right to one another. There ended up being really 5 areas that were highlighted that should be considered one day to have sewer infrastructure installed. These areas were the Common, the Beaverbrook Industrial Area, the Depot, the MBTA Foster Street area, and Long Lake area. The next step is to use the various criteria to rank and prioritize these areas using the data and to develop a recommended phasing plan for providing sewer service to those areas in town that will benefit the most.
So Nick, help us understand the process of ranking criteria per area of environmental concern. And what were the criteria that you used in the initial weighting factors?
Yeah. That was a long process that we undertook with CDM Smith, our consultant engineers, on this. So we described the various environmental and economic criteria that were evaluated in order to identify areas of town that should be focused on for wastewater planning. We looked at both economic and environmental impacts of sewer in certain parts of the town, and the analysis showed that whether it was working closely with the health agent and the Board of Health, the town planner, the planning board, the amount of hours of the water department staff themselves to put into this, we identified criteria that would be helpful in developing this plan. It's really criteria that is utilized in really any town that would be looking at sewering their town or any other piece of their town, such as soil composition, high groundwater, proximity to wetlands, water bodies, proximity to zone 2, which obviously us as the water department are very concerned about. And then economic planning. And a lot of that was done through the master plan that the planning board and Maren Toohill had worked on for years. And it being a very good document for CDM Smith to start off of.
How were the weighting factors originally determined? And how did town request to equally weight economic development criteria to environmental factors impact the final ranking matrix and prioritization of areas of concern?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Kirby. There's really no right or wrong way to do this type of weighting. It's really subjective and it was up to the water department here and how we made that final determination. The original weighting factor that CDM Smith had recommended, or at least the one that they had come forward with in the beginning, was a 75-25 split, where 75% weighted factor went to environmental areas of concern, and the other 25% went towards economic development. After much conversation around that, the water department decided to go with the 50-50 split. A lot of that had to do with the master plan that we just talked about, that Maren talked about, and the economic factors were definitely at play in the town of Littleton. That being said, it was kind of interesting whether we ran a 75-25 or a 50-50. Really, the same five areas that I just talked about a couple questions ago were the same five areas, no matter how we ran that analysis. So it really came out pretty strong that those are the five parts of town that need sewering.
Okay. So would LELWD be planning for the entirety of Littleton being included in a town sewer utility? And what's the planning process for delivery of such a town-wide service? How do you develop that? And how are the secondary ranking matrix results and the combined rankings table translated into where it makes sense to even plan for sewering, Nick?
Right. I mean, that was kind of our question to CDM Smith in the very beginning is, if we're going to look at sewering of our community, where does it start? Where does it end? And really, that's what they did when they started that needs assessment. And they looked at those things that we talked about, soils and proximity to water in Zone 2 and economic development. They looked at the whole town, and just those five areas came back as areas that needed to be sewered. So this isn't something that's going to continue to expand to every single person in the town of Littleton.
So would LELWD look to expand the existing wastewater discharge site at the high school to possibly accommodate a town-wide sewering service? And how has the peer review changed some of the possible solutions that can be reused by either adding or removing some stuff that came out from the first review by Sampson?
Well, the discharge site's limited. And you're right, the peer review looked at the discharge site. It recommended some further testing to confirm a few variables that we used in the engineering of the discharge site. But in the end, CDM Smith confirmed that the discharge site is good for 270,000 gallons per day, which is in line with what Westman and Sampson had engineered. It's just now been confirmed. It can't be expanded anymore. That's what that site can accommodate. But we're looking at flows that are much less than the 270,000 gallons per day. So the discharge site is a good one. I think really where the peer review raised some questions was in the next couple of phases that we'll be looking at, whether it was the site selection for a plant. And CDM Smith is just about wrapping up that piece of it now. The technologies that were recommended, if you remember, before the plan was a cork. Now we looked at it again holistically, similar to how we looked at the town, and looked at all technologies that are known to work for sewering, and that will be run against an economic model to figure out which one makes the most sense for our community. So those are really the next two pieces that the peer review will highlight as areas that need to be really focused on.
What are the next steps in this proposed phase planning and implementation process, Nick? Kind of, tell us a story about where you think it's going next.
Yeah, that's kind of just what I was hitting at. We now know the needs of the town. We know the flow required. We know where the flows are. So the next pieces will be to site a plant. So they're hopefully be getting pretty close to that. And then the economic pieces, which is, I know it's my biggest question, is how are we going to afford to pay for this thing? I know we always talk about it's the users are paying for it, but you got to make it affordable for the users. You can't, if it's for economic development, you can't drive them out of business. The town's a user, so we got to be sympathetic towards the town and make sure this thing is financially feasible.
We want to thank Maren Toohill, town planner, Corey Godfrey, Water Quality Manager, and Nick Lawler, General Manager of Littleton Electric Light and Water Department, for being with us today. We've covered a lot of ground or groundwater. We've learned a lot about water quality and how it relates to sewering. Maren did a great job of explaining the master plan and the economic areas of interest to best unlock the economic development potential of each area. Finally, we heard from Nick about the difficult process of tying together the identified environmental and economic goals and future directions of the two. Next episode, we plan to discuss alternative technology options and site selection of wastewater management and possible phasing of a Littleton town-wide sewering project. Thanks for being with us today. Hope to see you on our next episode of Watson Drops.